The air in a first-class cabin is supposed to feel different, a quiet hum of privilege, the scent of leather and possibility. But for Dr. Amara Sterling, a distinguished cardiac surgeon on her way to receive a Lifetime Achievement Award, the air on Global Wings Flight 734 felt heavy, toxic. It was poisoned by a single pair of eyes, those of a senior flight attendant named Karen Miller, who had decided Amara didn't belong. This wasn't just a misunderstanding over a carry-on bag. It was a judgment, a conviction passed in an instant, a conviction that would lead to handcuffs, public humiliation, and a call to the police. But what Karen didn't know was that the one phone call Amara made would summon a man who didn't just have power in the city, he owned the very ground on which they stood. Dr. Amara Sterling settled into seat 2B with a sigh of weary contentment. The past 72 hours had been a whirlwind of back-to-back surgeries culminating in a groundbreaking pediatric heart transplant that had made the local news. Now, all that stood between her and the prestigious Callahan Medical Prize in Chicago was this 5-hour flight from Westport International Airport, WIA. She was dressed in comfortable but chic travel attire, tailored black trousers, a silk shell top, and a soft cashmere cardigan. Her bag, a well-worn but elegant leather satchel containing her laptop and the speech she'd be giving, was stowed neatly under the seat in front of her. The first-class cabin was sparsely populated. A businessman in 1A was already asleep, his newspaper draped over his chest. A young couple in row 3 were whispering excitedly, likely on their honeymoon. And then there was Karen Miller. Karen had been with Global Wings for 22 years. She wore her seniority like a military decoration, her movements precise, her smile a practiced, brittle thing that rarely reached her eyes. She moved through the cabin with an air of proprietary ownership, and from the moment Amara stepped aboard, her gaze had snagged on her, sharp and assessing. Amara was used to it, the subtle double takes, the fleeting surprise in people's eyes when they learned she was a surgeon, not a nurse, a homeowner, not a renter, a passenger in first class, not an attendant. She had built a fortress of grace and professionalism around herself to withstand these silent aggressions. "Ma'am," Karen said, her voice cutting through the cabin's quiet hum. She was standing over Amara, her arms crossed. "That bag needs to go in the overhead compartment. All aisles and footwells must be clear for takeoff." Amara looked down at her satchel, tucked perfectly under the seat in front of her, not impeding the aisle or her own space in the slightest. "It's quite secure here," she replied, her voice calm and even. "It fits the dimensions for a personal item, and I'd prefer to keep it with me." Karen's smile tightened, a barely perceptible twitch of her lips. "Airline policy, ma'am. For the safety of all our passengers, it will have to go up." She didn't offer to help. She just stood there, an immovable object of authority. Amara knew the policy. She also knew it was selectively enforced. The man in 1A had a briefcase of a similar size at his feet. She decided it wasn't a battle worth fighting. "Of course," she said, reaching for her bag. As she stood, her phone, which she'd placed on the empty seat beside her, buzzed. It was a text from her husband, Robert. "Landed safe. Call you when you get to the hotel. I love you more than words can say. So proud of you." A genuine smile, the first in days, warmed Amara's face. She quickly typed back, "Love you too. Boarding now." "Ma'am, we need to put the phone away for takeoff," Karen snapped, her voice sharper this time. The plane hadn't even finished boarding. The jet bridge was still attached. "We haven't closed the cabin doors yet," Amara stated, not with attitude but as a simple fact. She slid the phone into her pocket. "And the bag is going up now." She lifted her satchel, which was heavier than it looked with her laptop and medical journals, and reached for the overhead bin. It was at that moment that Karen Miller made her fatal miscalculation. Instead of stepping back to give Amara space, she moved closer, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial, condescending whisper that was somehow louder than a shout. "Look, I don't know if you're new to this, but in first class, we follow the rules promptly. We don't cause a fuss. If you're going to be disruptive, we can find you a seat in the back." The implication was as clear as it was ugly. "You don't belong here. You're an imposter." Every muscle in Amara's body went rigid. The years of quiet dignity, of turning the other cheek, of being twice as good to get half as much, coalesced into a single point of cold, sharp anger. She placed her bag deliberately into the bin and closed it with a soft click. She then turned, her 5'7" frame seeming to tower over the flight attendant, and looked Karen directly in the eye. "Firstly," Amara said, her voice dangerously quiet, "I am not new to this. Secondly, your colleague in 1A has a bag of the same size at his feet, yet you said nothing to him. Thirdly, the cabin doors are still open, and my phone was in my hand for less than 10 seconds. And lastly, do not ever threaten to move my seat again. Your tone is unprofessional, your enforcement of the rules is curiously selective, and your insinuation is offensive. Am I being clear?" The cabin, already quiet, went utterly silent. The honeymooning couple stared, wide-eyed. Even the sleeping businessman seemed to stir. Karen's face, which had been a mask of condescending authority, turned a blotchy, furious red. The composure she prided herself on shattered into a million pieces. She saw not a paying first-class passenger asserting her rights, but a direct challenge to her dominance. In her mind, Amara's calm, articulate defiance was aggression. "That's it," Karen spat, her professionalism vanishing completely. "You are a threat to the safety of this flight. You're being aggressive and non-compliant." She turned on her heel and marched toward the cockpit, her voice rising. "Mark, get the captain and call airport security. This passenger is being removed. Now." Amara stood in stunned silence. It was happening so fast. From a simple request to a federal offense. She sank back into her seat, her heart, the organ she knew so intimately, now hammering against her ribs, not with fear, but with a profound, bone-deep weariness and a burgeoning, righteous fury. The flight to accept her award had just been grounded. The gate agent, a harried-looking man in his late 20s named Mark Peters, appeared at the front of the cabin, his face pale. He had clearly been fed a venomous, one-sided version of events by Karen. "Ma'am, Dr. Sterling?" he asked, his eyes darting around nervously. "I'm going to have to ask you to gather your belongings and come with me." "On what grounds?" Amara asked, her voice steady despite the tremor she felt in her hands. "The head flight attendant has identified you as a security risk. You were causing a disturbance and refusing to comply with crew instructions," Mark recited, the words sounding hollow and rehearsed. "That is a complete fabrication," Amara stated, looking past him to Karen, who stood by the galley, arms crossed, a vindicated smirk on her face. "I did exactly as she asked. What I objected to was her discriminatory and unprofessional behavior." "Ma'am, please," Mark pleaded, his voice cracking under the pressure. "Let's not make this more difficult. The captain has already approved your removal. It's out of my hands." A slow, creeping horror began to dawn on Amara. This wasn't a misunderstanding that could be cleared up with a calm conversation. This was a runaway train, and she was tied to the tracks. The other passengers were now staring openly, some with sympathy, others with suspicion, and most with the uncomfortable desire to simply not be involved. The shame was a physical thing, a hot flush that spread across her chest. She had dedicated her life to saving people, to being a pillar of her community. And here she was, being treated like a criminal. Refusing to leave would only escalate the situation into something far uglier. With a dignity she didn't feel, Amara stood up. She reached into the overhead bin, retrieved her satchel, and walked toward the front of the plane, her back straight, her head held high. She could feel every eye on her, hear the whispers breaking out like a rash behind her. As she stepped into the jet bridge, 2 uniformed officers from the Westport Airport Police Department were waiting. One was older, with a stern, impatient look on his face. His name tag read Davis. The other was younger, with an Asian surname, Chen, and a more neutral, observant expression. "This is her," Karen said, pointing dramatically from the doorway of the aircraft. "Dr. Amara Sterling. She was belligerent, refused to stow her luggage, was on her phone, and became aggressive with me when I instructed her on safety protocols." Officer Davis stepped forward, his hand resting casually on his service weapon. "Mates, go over here," he said, gesturing toward the wall of the jet bridge, his tone already accusatory. "We need to get your side of the story." But it didn't feel like he wanted her side. It felt like an interrogation. "Officer, I can assure you this is a gross misrepresentation," Amara began. Just answer the questions, Davis cut her off. Did you or did you not refuse to put your bag in the overhead? No, I did not. I questioned the selective enforcement, and then I complied. My bag was stowed when she called you. Did you or did you not refuse to put your phone away? No. The cabin door was open, and I was sending a single text message. So you admit you were on your phone, Davis said, twisting her words. Officer, Amara said, her patience fraying. This flight attendant singled me out from the moment I boarded. She threatened me, and when I stood up for myself, calmly and verbally, she called you. This is not about a bag or a phone. This is about bias. Karen, still hovering in the doorway, scoffed loudly. Bias? Oh, please. Don't play that card. I was doing my job. You're the one who got loud and aggressive. I felt threatened. Officer Davis nodded, accepting Karen's version without question. Ma'am, you're becoming agitated. I need you to calm down. Amara looked at him, incredulous. She was speaking in a measured tone, while Karen was practically vibrating with theatrical indignation. I am calm, she said through gritted teeth. It was then that Officer Chen spoke for the first time. Davis, maybe we should take this to the office. The jet bridge isn't secure, and they're trying to close out this flight. Fine, Davis grunted. Ma'am, you're not under arrest, but you are being detained for investigation. You'll need to come with us. He reached out and grabbed her arm, his grip surprisingly forceful. Amara flinched, pulling her arm back instinctively. Do not put your hands on me. That was all the justification Davis needed. That's it. You're resisting. Turn around. Before Amara could process what was happening, Davis had spun her around, pushed her against the corrugated wall of the jet bridge, and was yanking her arms behind her back. The cold, metallic click of handcuffs snapping around her wrists echoed in the enclosed space. Humiliation was no longer a strong enough word. This was a violation, a nightmare. The other passengers still boarding from a later group were now gawking as they were rerouted around the scene. A black woman, a doctor, a pillar of her community, being handcuffed in public based on the lies of a vindictive flight attendant. Tears of pure rage and disbelief welled in her eyes, but she refused to let them fall. They escorted her back into the terminal, a walk of shame past hundreds of strangers. They took her to a small, windowless security substation, tucked away behind a nondescript door near baggage claim. They sat her in a hard plastic chair. The handcuffs were finally removed, leaving angry red marks on her skin. You get one phone call, Officer Davis said, sliding a landline phone across the metal desk. I'd suggest it be to a lawyer. Amara took a deep, shuddering breath, her mind racing. A lawyer? Yes. But there was someone else she needed to call first. Someone who needed to know what was happening. Her hands trembled as she punched in the familiar number. It rang twice. Hey, you! His voice was warm, filled with love. Shouldn't you be in the air by now? Robert, she whispered, her voice breaking for the first time. Robert, something's happened. I'm at the airport, at WIA. They pulled me off the flight. The police... I'm in a security office near baggage claim. There was a dead silence on the other end of the line. For a full 5 seconds, the only sound was the hum of the office's fluorescent lights. When Robert Sterling spoke again, the warmth was gone, replaced by a tone of glacial, controlled fury that Amara had only heard a handful of times in their 15 years of marriage. It was the voice of a man whose world had just been threatened, a man who could move mountains with his will alone. Stay right where you are, he said, his voice a low, dangerous command. Don't say another word to them. I'm coming. Karen Miller was feeling triumphant. She was in the security office giving her official statement to Officer Chen while Officer Davis loomed nearby, arms crossed, looking pleased with his day's work. Mark, the gate agent, hovered by the door, wringing his hands and looking profoundly uncomfortable with the entire situation. And she said, and I quote, "Am I being clear?" In a very threatening manner, Karen was explaining, embellishing the story with each retelling. Her whole posture was aggressive. I have a duty of care to my other passengers and my crew. In my professional opinion, she was a clear and present danger to the flight. Amara sat silently in the corner, holding onto her husband's words like a lifeline. I'm coming. She ignored the lies, the blatant performance. She focused on her breathing, a technique she taught to anxious patients before surgery. In, out, control what you can control. The door to the small office opened, but it wasn't another officer. A man stepped inside and the entire atmosphere of the room shifted instantly. He was tall and impeccably dressed in a dark, tailored suit that spoke of understated but immense power. He had a presence that seemed to suck all the oxygen out of the room, his face a mask of cold, unadulterated rage. His eyes, the color of storm clouds, scanned the room, bypassing the officers, bypassing Karen, and landing on Amara. The change in him was instantaneous. The fury melted into profound concern. He strode across the room in 3 long steps, knelt before her chair, and took her hands in his. "Amara, honey, are you okay? Did they hurt you?" he asked, his voice a low, urgent murmur for her ears only. He gently touched the red marks on her wrists, and a muscle in his jaw clenched so hard it was visible from across the room. Amara finally let the tears fall, a silent stream of relief and anguish. "I'm okay, Robert. I'm just so humiliated." "I know," he whispered, his thumb stroking the back of her hand. "I've got you. It's over now." Officer Davis, annoyed by the interruption and the man's complete disregard for his authority, stepped forward. "Excuse me, sir. This is a restricted area. Who are you?" Robert Sterling rose to his full height, turning to face the officer. He seemed to grow taller, his presence utterly commanding. He looked at Davis, then at Chen, then his gaze fell upon Karen Miller, and the look in his eyes was so chilling, so utterly devoid of warmth, that she took an involuntary step back. He held Davis's gaze for a long moment before speaking, his voice not loud, but carrying an absolute, unquestionable authority that cut through the sterile air of the office. "My name is Robert Sterling." The name didn't immediately register with the officers. To them, he was just an expensive suit, probably a high-priced lawyer. Karen, however, felt a flicker of something. Sterling. The name was familiar, but she couldn't place it. Her smugness began to curdle into a vague unease. Robert continued, his voice lethally calm. "I am the Chief Executive Officer of the Westport Airport Authority, which means every inch of this building, from the tarmac to the toilets, including this pathetic little office and the jet bridge where you assaulted my wife, is my responsibility." Silence. A profound, deafening, soul-crushing silence. Officer Chen's pen froze mid-sentence. Mark, the gate agent, looked as if he might faint. Officer Davis's jaw went slack, his face draining of all color, a mottled patchwork of disbelief and dawning horror. But it was Karen Miller's reaction that was the most dramatic. The smirk she had worn for the past hour dissolved as if splashed with acid. Her face, which had been flushed with vindictive pleasure, turned a ghastly waxy white. Her mouth opened and closed silently, like a fish gasping for air. Her entire body began to tremble. In that one catastrophic moment, she understood that she had not just messed with the wrong passenger, she had single-handedly declared war on the king of the entire kingdom. Robert turned his attention to his wife, Dr. Amara Sterling, and his voice softened fractionally. "And this woman," he said, gesturing to Amara, "is not just a passenger. She is a world-renowned cardiothoracic surgeon, a philanthropist, the keynote speaker at the Callahan Medical Conference, and my wife of 15 years. He then slowly turned his gaze back to the room, his eyes locking on to Karen Miller, who now looked physically ill. "I believe you were just giving a statement," Robert said, the words dripping with ice. "Please, continue. I want to hear every single word of the lie you were telling about my wife." The bravado and righteous indignation that had fueled Karen Miller for the past hour evaporated, leaving behind a quivering mass of pure, unadulterated terror. She couldn't speak. Her mind was a frantic, screaming void. The lies she had so easily spun now felt like a noose tightening around her neck. Robert Sterling didn't wait for her to recover. His focus shifted with military precision. He looked at Officer Davis. "Officer, your name and badge number." It was not a request. Davis, still reeling, stammered, "D. Davis, badge 714. "Officer Davis," Robert said, his voice flat and devoid of emotion. You put my wife in handcuffs, in public, based on the unsubstantiated claims of a flight attendant. Did you review any surveillance footage from the gate or the jet bridge before you restrained her? Well, no, sir. The situation was, it was escalating. The situation was escalating because you chose to escalate it, Robert snapped, his voice cracking like a whip. Your police chief, Bill Carmichael, is a personal friend of mine. You can expect a call from him before your shift ends. You are to have no further contact with my wife. You are dismissed. Davis looked stunned, as if he'd been physically struck. He opened his mouth to argue, saw the look on Robert's face, and thought better of it. He gave a jerky nod and practically fled the room. Robert then looked at Officer Chen. And you? Chen swallowed hard but held his ground, his voice respectful. Officer Chen, sir, badge 1128. I advised my partner we should move to a private location. Robert gave a curt nod. Your professionalism, however minimal in this circus, is noted, Officer Chen. You are also dismissed. See to it that a full and unedited incident report is on my desk within the hour. Include your partner's premature use of restraints. Chen nodded sharply. Yes, sir. He gathered his notepad and followed his partner out, leaving Amara, Robert, Karen, and the terrified gate agent, Mark, alone in the suffocatingly small room. The full weight of Robert Sterling's fury now descended upon the two airline employees. He turned first to Mark. You, he said, pointing a finger. Name, airline, position. Mark Peters, sir, Global Wings Airlines, customer service gate agent. Mr. Peters, did you witness the initial incident on the aircraft? No, sir. Karen, Ms. Miller, she came out and said the passenger needed to be removed. So you took the word of one employee, without speaking to the passenger, and called the police to have a first-class ticket holder forcibly removed from a flight? The captain, Mark stammered, looking desperately toward Karen for help, but she was a statue of fear. The captain who wasn't there either, Robert finished for him. Get your supervisor and your station manager down to this office immediately. Do not call them. Go find them. Tell them Robert Sterling wants to see them 5 minutes ago. Go! Mark bolted from the room as if escaping a burning building, and then there was only Karen. Robert walked slowly toward her, his expensive leather shoes making no sound on the linoleum floor. He stopped directly in front of her. She had to crane her neck to look up at him, and she was visibly shaking. Ms. Miller, he began, his voice dropping to a low, menacing growl. You have been with Global Wings for 22 years. You are a senior crew member. You are supposed to be the best of the best, the model of professionalism and service. He paused, letting the words hang in the air. Instead, you chose to target a woman of color traveling alone. You manufactured a conflict. You lied to the gate agent. You lied to the captain, and you lied to the police. You turned a simple flight into a public spectacle of humiliation and abuse for my wife. All I can only assume, because your prejudices wouldn't allow you to believe that a black woman could possibly belong in your precious first-class cabin. Karen finally found her voice, a pathetic, squeaking thing. No, that's not true. She was aggressive. She threatened me. Did she? Robert asked, his eyebrow arching with deadly curiosity. Because Westport International has over 5,000 high-definition security cameras. There is a camera at the gate. There is a camera on the jet bridge. There are even cameras with audio capturing capabilities pointed at the entrance of every single aircraft at every single gate. And my chief of security is pulling that footage right now. So I ask you again, Ms. Miller, would you like to revise the statement you were so confidently giving when I walked in? This is your one and only chance to tell me the truth. The mention of video and audio evidence was the final blow. The last of Karen's defenses crumbled. Her face contorted and a dry, racking sob escaped her lips. I'm sorry, she whispered, the words catching in her throat. I'm so sorry. Robert stared at her, his expression utterly unmoved by her tears. You are not sorry for what you did, he said, his voice like chips of ice. You are sorry you got caught. You are sorry that the woman you chose to profile and humiliate happens to be married to the one man who can burn your entire career to the ground with a single phone call. He took a step back. pulling out his own phone. He dialed a number from memory. "Brenda, it's Robert Sterling. Yes, I'm fine, but I'm afraid we have a problem. A very big one. It involves your airline, Global Wings, Flight 734, and your senior flight attendant, Karen Miller. No, this isn't something we can discuss later. I'm in Security Substation 4 near the South Baggage Claim, and you'll want to get here before I call the press." He hung up without waiting for a reply. He turned back to Karen, whose face was now streaked with mascara. "The Vice President of North American Operations for your airline is on her way down. I suggest you remain here and contemplate the series of profoundly poor decisions that led you to this moment. Your life as you know it is about to change." Brenda Hastings, Vice President of North American Operations for Global Wings, was in the middle of a quarterly budget meeting when her phone vibrated with the specific, jarring buzz she reserved for red-level emergencies. The caller ID read, "David Chen, WIA Station MGR." She silenced it. A moment later, it buzzed again. And again. On the third call, she excused herself, a knot of irritation tightening in her stomach. "David, this had better be a fire on the runway," she answered, her voice clipped and impatient. "Worse!" David's voice was a panicked squeak, thin and reedy with terror. "Brenda, you need to get down here. Security Substation 4. Now! Robert Sterling is here. His wife was the passenger Karen Miller had removed from Flight 734. The name hit Brenda like a physical blow. Robert Sterling. Not just the CEO of Westport International, but a titan of industry, a man whose favor could make or break an airline's hub operations. He was a strategic partner, a powerful ally, and an unimaginably dangerous enemy. The budget meeting, her quarterly reports, her entire world suddenly shrank to the size of that one horrifying piece of information. "I'm on my way," she said, her voice dropping to a deadly calm. She walked back into the meeting, collected her belongings with an unreadable expression, and said, "The meeting is over. Handle it." She was out the door before anyone could ask a question, her mind racing, cycling through a dozen damage control scenarios, each more inadequate than the last. She arrived at the substation, David Chen trailing in her wake like a nervous ghost. The scene was even worse than she had imagined. It wasn't loud or chaotic. It was worse. It was a tableau of absolute power. Robert Sterling stood, a figure carved from ice and fury, his arm resting protectively on the back of the chair where his wife, Dr. Amara Sterling, sat. Amara was the picture of stunning, wounded dignity, her composure a silent testament to the magnitude of the offense. And huddled in the corner was Karen Miller, her 22-year career, her pride, her entire identity, collapsing in on itself in shuddering, silent sobs. "Robert," Brenda began, forcing a tone of controlled concern into her voice. "David just told me. I came as fast as I could. What on earth happened here? I am so sorry for any inconvenience." Robert's laugh was a cold, sharp sound that held no humor. "Inconvenience, Brenda? Is that what we're calling it? Your senior flight attendant racially profiled my wife, manufactured a confrontation, lied to the captain and gate staff, and had her falsely detained and handcuffed by airport police. Inconvenience is a long layover. This is a corporate-sponsored assault." He methodically, clinically, laid out the events as Amara had recounted them. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. Every carefully enunciated word was a hammer blow against the foundation of Global Wings' reputation. He spoke of the selective enforcement of the rules, the condescending tone, the fabricated threat, the public humiliation. Brenda's mind, trained in the art of corporate deflection, immediately jumped to its programmed response. "This is appalling, Robert. Utterly unacceptable. I assure you, Ms. Miller's actions do not reflect the values or training of Global Wings. We will launch an immediate and thorough investigation into this matter. She will be placed on leave, of course, pending the outcome." It was the standard playbook response designed to placate and delay. It was also the worst possible thing she could have said. "There will be no investigation, Brenda," Robert snapped, his voice dropping, becoming more dangerous. "The time for you to investigate has passed. This isn't a he said, she said situation. This is a fact. I have 5,000 cameras in this airport. My security team is currently packaging the high-definition video and audio from the gate and jet bridge. This isn't about discovering the truth. We already have it. This is about consequences." It was then that Amara spoke. She hadn't moved, but her voice cut through the tension with the precision of a scalpel. She looked not at Robert, but directly at Brenda. "Ms. Hastings," Amara said, her tone dispassionate, analytical, as if diagnosing a terminal illness. "Your employee did not have a bad day. She exhibited a clear pattern of behavior. It began with an assumption, escalated through microaggressions, and culminated in a gross abuse of power when she was challenged. This is not a training issue. It's a character issue, a character you have empowered for 22 years. Your investigation is irrelevant. The disease is obvious." Brenda felt her corporate composure begin to crack. This was slipping away from her. The Sterlings were not interested in apologies or process. They wanted blood. Robert stepped back into the conversational fray, his objective clear. "So let's talk about those consequences, shall we? The police officers involved will face an internal affairs review that I will personally monitor. But that's my house. Let's talk about yours." He paused, letting the silence stretch. "What happens now is up to my wife." He turned to Amara, his expression softening, the entire world outside of her ceasing to exist for him in that moment. "My love," he said gently, "tell me what justice looks like to you." Amara took a deep breath. She looked at Karen, whose weeping had subsided into a pathetic, shuddering silence. She saw not a monster, but a small, petty woman whose prejudice had been allowed to fester into something monstrous. Then she looked at Brenda, the embodiment of the corporate machine that had enabled it. "First," Amara said, her voice ringing with indisputable authority, "she is terminated, not suspended, while you conduct a sham investigation to see if you can save her pension. Her employment with your airline ends today. Her access to this airport is revoked. People like her, who wield their sliver of authority as a weapon against others, have no place in a position of public trust." Karen let out a choked gasp, a sound of profound loss. "Second," Amara continued, her gaze locking onto Brenda's, "this cannot be solved by firing one person. She is a symptom, not the disease. I want to know what Global Wings will do to ensure this never ever happens to another person of color on one of your flights again. And I don't mean another diversity seminar. I mean a fundamental structural change in how you train your employees and how you investigate complaints against them. Because we all know I wasn't the first victim of this kind of treatment. I was just the first one who happened to be married to the CEO of the airport." The raw, unvarnished truth of that statement hung in the air, a devastating indictment. Brenda Hastings, for the first time in her professional life, was utterly speechless. There was no corporate spin for this. She recovered, her survival instincts kicking in. "I understand," she managed to say. Turning to Karen, her voice became brittle and sharp, devoid of any sympathy. "Ms. Miller, your employment with Global Wings is suspended, pending your termination. Surrender your crew identification and all airport credentials to Mr. Chen now." David Chen, who had been trying to make himself invisible, flinched as if electrocuted. He numbly held out a hand. With trembling fingers, Karen Miller unclipped the ID badge from her uniform. The plastic card bearing a smiling photo of her from a decade ago had been her key to the world, her symbol of status and identity. As she dropped it into David's sweaty palm, a final, racking sob tore from her throat. It was the sound of a life being irrevocably broken. Robert nodded to the two airport security guards who had been waiting silently by the door. "Please escort this individual from the premises. She is now a member of the public and is no longer permitted in restricted areas." As the guards gently but firmly led a dazed Karen Miller away, her world shattered. The first cracks of karma had appeared. But Robert and Amara knew this was only the beginning. The rot went deeper. That night, Robert didn't go home. He convened an emergency meeting with his lead counsel, Jessica Liu, a razor-sharp litigator with a reputation for corporate evisceration. In the sterile, glass-walled conference room overlooking the glittering runways of his airport, they reviewed the evidence. The footage was even more damning than he'd imagined. The audio captured Karen's condescending tone perfectly. It captured Amara's calm, firm response. It captured everything. Their investigator, a former detective, called Jessica an hour into the meeting. "We got a hit on the passenger manifest," he said. "A university student in 3A, name's Leo. His social media shows he's a vlogger. A long shot, but he might have been recording." Leo, when contacted, was nervous but resolute. He not only had a video of the confrontation, but he had also started recording again when the police led Amara away in handcuffs. He had been too intimidated to intervene, but he knew he had witnessed a gross injustice. He agreed to provide a sworn statement and a copy of the video. By 3 a.m., they had the final pieces. Brenda Hastings, under immense pressure, had been forced to grant them access to Karen's personnel file. It was a cesspool. 7 complaints in 5 years, all from minority passengers, all detailing the same pattern of condescending and aggressive behavior. All of them had been dismissed by her supervisor, a man who, a quick background check revealed, had been a groomsman at Karen's wedding. Simultaneously, Robert's contact in the police department sent over a summary of Officer Davis's file. It was a mirror image of Karen's. A dozen complaints, a clear pattern of racial bias, all systematically buried by the thin blue line. Robert looked at the mountain of evidence before him. This was a slam-dunk case. Brenda had already called him twice, her voice stripped of all authority, offering a private, multi-million-dollar settlement and a personal apology. All they had to do was sign a non-disclosure agreement. He drove home as the sun was rising, finding Amara on their terrace, wrapped in a blanket, watching the dawn. He explained the offer, the money, the apology, the quiet end to it all. She listened patiently, then turned to him, her eyes clear and resolute. "If we take that money, Robert, what happens to the next person? The one who isn't married to you? They'll bury this. Karen will be the scapegoat, and nothing will fundamentally change. The system that protected her and the officer who arrested me will remain intact. Our silence will be the glue that holds it all together." She stood and walked to his side. "I don't want their money. I want them to be accountable. In public. I want every airline and every police department to see this and know that there are consequences they can't buy their way out of." A slow smile spread across Robert's face, a look of profound love and admiration. She was, as always, his moral compass. He knew what he had to do. He pulled out his phone and called Jessica Liu, waking her up. "Jessica," he said, his voice ringing with a newfound sense of purpose, "reject the settlement offer from Global Wings. File the lawsuit this morning and schedule a press conference. We're not just making this right, we're making this a reckoning." The press conference was not held in a stuffy corporate office, but in the soaring, sunlit atrium of the Westport Community Arts Center, a facility largely funded by the Sterling Family Foundation. The choice of venue was deliberate, a subtle message that this was not a corporate dispute, but a matter of public interest in civil rights. Robert and Amara stood at the podium, a united front of steel and grace. To their side was their lead counsel, Jessica Liu, whose expression suggested she was about to methodically dismantle a bomb, or build one. Robert spoke first. He was the CEO, the man of power, but he spoke not as an executive but as a husband. He laid out the timeline of events in a cold, factual narrative, his voice devoid of emotion, which made the details of the injustice all the more chilling. He announced the filing of a civil rights lawsuit against Global Wings Airlines and the Westport Airport Police Department, citing a systemic failure of training, oversight, and corporate culture that enabled the targeted harassment of his wife. Then Jessica Liu stepped forward. She was all business. "This lawsuit is not primarily about financial compensation," she stated, her voice sharp and clear, addressing the sea of cameras and microphones. "This is about injunctive relief. We are seeking court-mandated, comprehensive, and verifiable reforms at Global Wings. Let me be clear, we are not asking for a new sensitivity training module. We are demanding a complete overhaul of their systems of accountability to be monitored by an independent, court-appointed auditor for a period of no less than 5 years." Finally, Amara approached the microphone. The room fell silent. She was not there to recount the details of her humiliation. She was there to provide the context. "What happened to me on Flight 734 was not random," she said, her voice steady and resonant. "It was the predictable outcome of a culture that tolerates and protects casual prejudice. For every incident like mine that comes to light, There are thousands that go unreported, dismissed, and ignored. The victims are told they are being too sensitive or playing the race card. They are silenced by the very people entrusted with their safety. We are here today to give a voice to those who have been silenced. As she finished, Jessica's team sent a coordinated email to the entire press list. The subject line was simple: Evidence File, Sterling versus Global Wings. It contained the full, unedited video from the student, Leo, which was far more damning than the silent gate camera footage. It showed the entire encounter, complete with crystal clear audio of Karen's condescending tone and Amara's calm, measured replies. It showed the public handcuffing, Amara's flinch of shock and pain, and Officer Davis's aggressive posture. Within an hour, the story was not just news, it was a global phenomenon. The video exploded across social media. The hashtag #ShockGatekeeperKaren began trending worldwide. Memes were created. Cable news channels scrapped their scheduled programming. The court of public opinion had convened, and its verdict was swift and merciless. For Karen Miller, the aftermath was a slow, agonizing descent into a private hell. She first saw the story on a morning news show while sitting in her living room, numbly sipping coffee. Her own face stared back at her from the television, followed by the video clip. Hearing her own voice, twisted by prejudice and arrogance, was a surreal, out-of-body experience. The woman on the screen was a monster. The phone began to ring. It was her sister screaming at her. "What did you do, Karen? It's everywhere!" Old friends sent terse text messages before blocking her number. Her social media accounts were flooded with thousands of hateful messages. She deleted them, but it was like trying to hold back the ocean. The termination letter from Global Wings arrived via courier that afternoon. It was a single cold page citing gross misconduct. Her union representative, after reviewing the evidence file, sent a brief formal email stating they could not contest the termination. She was completely, utterly alone. Her supervisor, the one who had buried years of complaints for her, was also fired in the corporate purge that followed, a desperate attempt by the airline to cauterize the wound. He left her a single vitriolic voicemail, blaming her for ruining his life, before blocking her number as well. The most crushing blow came a week later at the grocery store. A young woman pushing a cart stopped and stared at her. "You're her," the woman said, her voice filled with contempt. "You're gatekeeper, Karen." The shame was a physical force pressing down on her, suffocating her. This was her new identity, not a senior flight attendant, not a respected professional. She was a hashtag, a cautionary tale, a pariah. For Officer Davis, the institutional walls that had protected him for so long crumbled under the pressure. Police Chief Bill Carmichael, facing a political firestorm and unrelenting pressure from Robert Sterling's office, had no choice but to act decisively. Davis was called into an internal affairs interview, but it wasn't the usual collegial chat. He was confronted with the video, his own body cam footage, which he had conveniently failed to mention in his report, and his long, ugly history of civilian complaints. His blustering defenses about officer safety and a non-compliant suspect sounded hollow and ridiculous in the face of the visual evidence of him manhandling a calm, unarmed woman. He was given a choice: resign immediately, forfeiting a portion of his pension, or face a public termination hearing that would expose his entire disciplinary record. He chose to resign. But his nightmare was just beginning. Inspired by the Sterling's lawsuit, a local civil rights attorney began re-examining Davis's old cases. He found 2 other people of color who had been mistreated and were willing to sue. Suddenly, Davis wasn't just an ex-cop. He was a defendant in 3 separate civil lawsuits, his name forever synonymous with police misconduct. Global Wings Airlines was hemorrhaging. Their stock lost 20% of its value in 3 days. Corporate accounts were sensitive to the PR optics, began to cancel their contracts. Boycotts, organized on social media, gained traction. Videos emerged of protesters outside airports with signs reading, "Fly global, fly bigoted." Brenda Hastings was trotted out to give a stilted, lawyer-vetted public apology on national television. But her words about reaffirming their commitment to diversity rang hollow and were widely mocked online. Behind the scenes, their legal team was in a panic. They filed motions to have the lawsuit dismissed, which Jessica Liu swatted away with contemptuous ease. The discovery process became a corporate vivisection. Jessica's team subpoenaed years of internal communications. They found emails, memos, and HR reports that painted a devastating picture of a corporation that actively ignored a pattern of racist behavior among its staff. They found the smoking gun, an email from Karen's fired supervisor to an HR manager, dismissing a formal complaint from a Hispanic family by saying, "Karen was just keeping the cabin orderly. You know how loud they can get." Faced with the certainty of a catastrophic public trial, Global Wing's board of directors ordered their lawyers to surrender. The settlement negotiation was not a negotiation at all. It was a dictation. Jessica Liu laid out the terms, and the airline, broken and humiliated, agreed to every single one. The monetary donation to a charity that provided scholarships for minority students pursuing careers in aviation was enormous. But the centerpiece was the consent decree, the legally binding document of reform. It stipulated the creation of a new, civilian-led oversight board for all discrimination complaints, a complete ban on the secret file system that had protected employees like Karen, and a new 3 strikes policy for substantiated complaints of bias. Every single employee, from the baggage handlers to the CEO, would be required to complete an annual, intensive anti-bias and de-escalation training program designed by a civil rights group of Amara's choosing. It was the most sweeping, comprehensive set of reforms ever imposed on a major U.S. airline. As a final, quiet condition of the settlement, Brenda Hastings was permanently reassigned to manage the airline's remote operations in Anchorage, Alaska, a corporate Siberia. The day the settlement was finalized, Amara and Robert once again stood before the press, this time on the steps of the federal courthouse. Amara looked out at the cameras, not with anger or even triumph, but with a profound sense of solemn victory. "Today is not just about a settlement," she said, her voice carrying across the plaza. "It is about a new precedent. It is a message to every corporation that a non-disclosure agreement cannot buy your way out of accountability. It is a message to every employee that the uniform you wear is not a shield for your prejudice. And it is a message to every person who has ever been made to feel small, unwelcome, or unworthy that your voice matters. We did not set out to destroy a career or a company. We set out to demand a higher standard of human decency. The work is not over, but today we have proven that when we stand together against injustice, we can force even the most powerful institutions to change." The karma that had come for Karen Miller and Officer Davis wasn't a sudden bolt of lightning. It was a slow, crushing, methodical weight. It was the weight of their own actions, their own choices, and their own prejudices, now fully and publicly exposed for the entire world to see. This wasn't just a story about a bad flight. It was a stark reminder that prejudice isn't always loud and violent. Sometimes it wears a corporate uniform and a plastic smile. It hides in the selective enforcement of petty rules and the abuse of minor authority. But as we saw with Karen Miller and Officer Davis, the universe and a well-funded legal team has a way of balancing the scales. Their actions, born from a sense of entitled power, led them to a destination of public disgrace and personal ruin. It's a powerful lesson that your position in life never gives you the right to dehumanize someone else, because you never truly know who you're dealing with or who they have on speed dial. True karma isn't just about getting what you deserve. It's about becoming a catalyst for the change you deserve to see in the world. If this story of justice and accountability resonated with you, and if you believe that standing up to prejudice in all its forms is crucial, then please help this story reach more people. Hit that like button, share this video with your friends and family, and be sure to subscribe to the channel for more true life stories where karma is the final, undeniable destination. Let us know in the comments below. What would you have done in Amara's situation? We read everyone.